Red Bull just brought an upgrade to Australia that could lock the championship before the first race even finishes. Not because it looks radical, not because it topped the testing charts, but because hidden inside the Bahrain data was nearly a full second of untapped race pace. 2,000 laps completed. 0 major failures. 12 degrees cooler engine temperatures. No energy clipping on the straights. And a half-second performance gain coming in a single upgrade package. But here's the part nobody is talking about. These upgrades are connected. The side pods feed the diffuser. The diffuser feeds rear grip. The rear grip protects the tires. And the Ford power unit turns heat into downforce. It is not one upgrade. It is a system. And systems are almost impossible to copy in weeks. If this works in Melbourne, the gap could become structural. Not temporary. Not situational. Structural. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why Australia might quietly decide the entire season. Now that the hook has set the warning, we need to understand what really happened in Bahrain. Because the lap times you saw on the screen were not the real story. Red Bull did not chase headlines. They did not bolt on soft tires for a glory run. They did not empty the battery for one dramatic lap. Instead, they did something far more revealing. They ran. And ran. And ran. More than 2,000 laps across the test. That is not just mileage. That is confidence. Confidence in the chassis. Confidence in the cooling. Confidence in the Ford power unit. And here is why that matters. When a team spends testing proving reliability instead of searching for fixes, it means the foundation is already stable. Most teams were still fighting balance swings, porpoising traces, energy clipping. Red Bull was fine-tuning deployment maps. That is a completely different phase of preparation. But this is where things start to get uncomfortable for the competition. During long race simulations, Verstappen was not pushing. He was managing. Running conservative engine settings, protecting tires. And still, the data shows he was averaging roughly 0.4 faster per lap than Ferrari in comparable stints. 0.4. Over a full race distance, that becomes dominant. And this was with map 4, not the aggressive setting. Which raises the obvious question. How much is left in reserve? Sector 2 is where the RB22 quietly exposed itself. Technical corners, medium speed transitions, balance-sensitive zones. Verstappen was purple in the mini-sectors while running conservative power deployment. That suggests the aerodynamic platform is working exactly as designed. Stable rear, predictable rotation, minimal correction mid-corner. And that is before the Australia upgrade package even arrives. But here is the detail most viewers missed during testing. Top speed, without drag reduction. 344 km per hour on the main straight. No clipping. No visible drop in hybrid output at the end of the straight. That is not raw horsepower alone. That is efficient energy harvesting and intelligent deployment. The Ford unit is running cooler. Around 12 degrees cooler than projected competitor benchmarks. Cooler temperatures mean tighter packaging. Tighter packaging means cleaner airflow. Cleaner airflow means more downforce without extra drag. And suddenly, everything connects. This is not just an engine partnership. It is an aerodynamic weapon. But we are not at the most important point yet. Because Bahrain was not about showing dominance. It was about validation. Red Bull confirmed full correlation between simulation data and real track behavior. 100% alignment. In Formula 1, that is gold. It means every wind tunnel hour translates. Every simulation run matters. And when correlation is perfect, development becomes predictable. And when development is predictable, upgrades hit immediately. Which brings us directly to Melbourne. Because the car that ran in Bahrain is not exactly the one lining up in Australia. And what they are adding there changes everything. Melbourne is not just another race. It is the first real test of intent. Because what Red Bull is bringing to Australia is not cosmetic. It is structural. Let's start with the side pods. The blown diffuser version 2 concept is no longer experimental. In Bahrain, it was validated. In Australia, it becomes aggressive. The undercut is deeper, sharper, more committed. Air does not simply pass around the bodywork. It is guided, accelerated, and then driven directly toward the diffuser. But here is the critical part. The Ford power unit runs cooler, which allows tighter internal packaging, which allows more aggressive airflow channels, which allows the hot air exiting the engine to energize the diffuser. That is controlled thermal manipulation. They are turning engine heat into rear downforce, and that changes rear stability under load, especially in medium speed corners. Albert Park has long direction changes. Turns 9 through 12 demand confidence at the rear. If the rear steps out, lap time disappears instantly. But if the rear is planted, driver's attack, earlier throttle, higher minimum speed, more tire protection. And this is where the system becomes dangerous. Because the front wing has also been redesigned. A new mainplane geometry, more camber, more authority in slow corners. Verstappen mentioned slight hesitation in tight hairpins during testing. That weakness has been targeted directly. Now imagine this balance. Stronger front bite in slow entry, more rear stability in medium exit, cleaner airflow feeding the diffuser, and improved traction at corner exit. That is not a small gain. That is harmony. And harmony in Formula One is worth more than raw numbers. But we are not finished. Because small details often decide championships. Airbox winglets, refined mirror mounts, minor changes visually, major changes aerodynamically. They clean turbulent air before it hits the rear wing. 5% more rear stability in crosswinds. Melbourne is unpredictable. Gusts come without warning. Cars become nervous under braking. But a stable rear allows controlled braking zones. And controlled braking zones protect tires, which protects race pace. And here is the hidden layer. The diffuser extension combined with the rear crash structure modification increases airflow expansion efficiency. Better traction out of the final corner, which leads onto one of the longest flat-out sections of the lap. Now connect that to the Ford engine. No clipping. Consistent hybrid deployment. Improved launch map for race starts. Less turbo lag. More immediate torque delivery. If Verstappen launches cleanly, if he controls track position, the integrated package allows him to dictate pace, manage energy, protect tires, and respond to strategy threats calmly. This is not about one qualifying lap. This is about Sunday control. But here is the uncomfortable truth for rivals. These upgrades are interconnected. You cannot copy just the side pods. You cannot bolt on a similar front wing and expect identical balance. The entire airflow philosophy is linked to the cooling layout of the Ford unit. That requires redesign, wind tunnel hours, manufacturing cycles, correlation testing. And correlation takes time. Red Bull already validated theirs, which means their simulation tools are aligned with reality. So when they push development further, it lands immediately. And if Melbourne confirms a half-second improvement in race trim, the gap may not be something teams close in weeks. It may take months. But there is still one unknown. And it could decide whether this becomes dominance, or just another competitive fight. Because Australia will reveal something testing never could. How the RB22 behaves under real pressure. Wheel to wheel. Dirty air. Strategy shifts. And that is where the final piece of the puzzle appears. Pressure. That is the one variable Bahrain could not simulate. Testing is controlled. Predictable. Almost sterile. But Australia is different. Lights out. Full fuel. Dirty air into turn 1. And suddenly, the perfect numbers on a laptop mean nothing if the car cannot survive chaos. This is where the RB22 faces its first real exam. Because dominance in clean air is one thing. Control in traffic is something else entirely. Albert Park punishes overheating when following closely. Brake temperatures spike. Rear tires suffer. Hybrid deployment becomes irregular if airflow is disturbed. And here is where the Ford integration becomes critical again. Running 12 degrees cooler in testing is not just a statistic. It is margin. Margin when airflow drops behind another car. Margin when safety cars reset tire temperatures. Margin when drivers push after restarts. That cooling advantage could mean Verstappen attacks earlier after a restart, while others are still protecting systems. But here is where things become even more strategic. Red Bull's energy deployment showed zero clipping in Bahrain. That suggests efficient harvesting under braking. In Melbourne, heavy braking zones into turn 3 and turn 11 create recovery opportunities. If the RB22 harvests better, it deploys better, which means sustained top speed, lap after lap. And that makes overtaking attempts extremely difficult for rivals. Now consider tire degradation. Testing indicated almost negligible drop-off during long runs. But Melbourne's surface is less abrasive than Bahrain. That changes the equation. Lower degradation means strategy flexibility. One stop becomes viable. Track position becomes king. And if Red Bull locks the front early, they can dictate pace conservatively, force others to overheat tires in dirty air, and stretch the gap strategically. But here is the hidden tension. Verstappen admitted the car can feel aggressive if pushed beyond the balance window. Too much front load. Too much throttle too early. The rear can become sharp. In clean air, that is manageable. In traffic, that becomes risk. And rivals know that. Which means qualifying might be more important than expected. Because if Ferrari or Mercedes start ahead, the pressure dynamic flips. Now Verstappen must attack in dirty air. Now tire management becomes reactive. Now cooling margins are tested aggressively. And that is something we have not seen yet. But this leads to the deeper layer. If Red Bull's upgrades perform as projected, half a second in race trim is transformative. It is not visible immediately. It appears slowly, lap after lap. Small gap, then medium gap, then strategic control. And by the final stint, it feels inevitable. That kind of dominance is psychological. Rivals stop taking risks. Strategy becomes defensive. Drivers begin thinking about second place instead of victory. And that mental shift is how championships are quietly built. But here is the question that matters most. What if Australia confirms the simulation numbers exactly? Perfect correlation again. Projected gains delivered instantly. If that happens, Red Bull's development roadmap accelerates. Because when you trust your data, you push harder. Bigger upgrades. More aggressive concepts. And other teams? They hesitate. They double-check. They question their wind tunnel. And hesitation in Formula One is costly. So Australia is not just race one. It is validation day. If the RB22 controls pace, if the Ford engine maintains efficiency under pressure, if tire degradation remains minimal, then the evidence from Bahrain becomes undeniable. And once that becomes undeniable, the season narrative shifts immediately. From competition to containment. The only thing left is to see whether the lights going out in Melbourne confirm what the numbers have been whispering all along. Because if they do, we may not be watching the start of a battle. We may be watching the quiet beginning of another era.